All right. Moderately lucid, I will take. All right, so welcome to lecture 6. We have all kinds of fun stuff to talk about today. We're going to pick up where we were talking last about how I can speed up my workflow. I'm going to introduce some cool ideas for you in terms of how you can work a little bit faster, not necessarily staying up longer, which again has diminishing returns. Your work quality tends to go down the longer you stay awake. But what we're going to delve into is hotkeys and setting up hotkeys. We're going to delve into marking menus, and we are going to delve into the hotbox. And all of these are terrific tools for helping you to work just a little bit faster. And we're also going to be getting into image planes today, which is very exciting because we're going to start talking about how what makes good reference versus not as good, and we're going to delve into the process of, well, how do I take image planes and bring them into Maya, because they're obviously a huge time saver in terms of the speed at which we can model, and also a tremendous savings in terms of the quality and accuracy of the models we build. So after today's class, you will be able to bring your own reference images into Maya and build whatever you want. So not just the stuff that I'm asking you to build. However, that is with a word of caution. Do the stuff you're supposed to be doing first, then build X-Wings, okay? Because usually what happens is as soon as everybody finds out how to bring image planes in, they just want to build what they want to build, and I get that. But make sure you're doing the work you have to do first and then do the fun stuff after. I like to talk about it in terms of you have to earn the time to do the stuff you want to do. Does that make sense? You got to earn that time. So make sure you're doing that stuff first. And we're going to get into materials today. So we're going to talk all about coloring geometry and materials, material behavior, and specifically the hypershade, which is where all these materials are stored. And we're going to start to see how we can play with those elements as well through the modeling process. And there's sort of the baby steps to get into UV mapping and texturing, which is what we'll be coming up with pretty soon. So lots of good stuff to talk about today. And it all starts with a hell yeah from Brian. And a fun little vocabulary thing. Yes, a vocabulary thing. So, this is something that we are looking for when we are grading. And when we ask for freezing transformations, what we're talking about is zeroing out information on your geometry in terms of where it is in space. Because as we move objects, everything is calculated in terms of grid units or in terms of your rotations, we're talking about degrees. But all this information is stored on the geometry, and you'll see it in the channel box most readily. And what we want to do is, while we're modeling, periodically I talked about the fact that, like every 15 minutes I save my file with a different name incrementally, and I delete the history so I don't get a huge buildup of that. But a third thing that I do before I save is actually freeze transformations on my geometry. And again, it's just sort of a flush. It sort of cleans things out. It is a bit of a misnomer because freezing transformations doesn't necessarily freeze it like it's locked. So they could have probably come up with a better name. But what we're doing is we're not locking the geometry in place, but what we're doing is we're zeroing out everything. And what will happen is when we freeze transformations, it will turn all the values to 0 except for the scale values, which will change to 1/1 scale, or its actual size. So once we get geometry the right size, again, we want to freeze transformations. And that's just telling Maya and whoever is working with whatever it is you've made that this is this object's home starting position. So instead of the origin being that, here is your new home position. And it can be anywhere. So let's take a quick look at freezing transformations and why it is so faboo. All right, so here we are in Maya. And again, here's a lovely cube, and you'll notice that its transformations are all at 0. Scale is at 1. But as soon as I move this object around, you'll see that I start generating transformations. And if I scale the object, my scale values will change. And the idea here is periodically we like to just cancel out this information, just make it all zeros, and then this is what its final size is, so this should all be 1s. So let's just say I'm moving this thing around, and this is where it's going to live within my scene, not at the origin, but here. So what I'm going to do is go over here to modify and choose Freeze Transformations. And again, when you do that, it zeroes out all of the values except for scale, which becomes 1. That's its home size and position. And then if I move the object, if I plug in all zeros, it goes there, not the origin, because that's its new home position. Does that make sense? Again, easy process. 1, select the geometry in object mode. Gotta be selected, gotta be object mode. Modify, freeze transformation. All good? Hell yeah?
Hell yeah.
There we go. 2 of you are on board. Everybody else is still dreaming Pop-Tarts. You're tired? I know, me too. You know what? Your best bet, fake it. There you go. Feign enthusiasm. It's amazing how you can kind of trick yourself into being positive even when you're not feeling it. And believe me, it actually makes a big difference. It's much harder to do things when you're not really in the mood. But if you can find a positive in there, even if it's completely fabricated. Thank you very much. All right, well, let's go, my digital friends. Hopefully you guys are excited too. I didn't see any hell yeahs from you guys, but oh, there we go.
Yeah, fake it till you make it.
Okay, I'm not going to touch that one. There was a time when I would have been all over that joke, but no. All over that joke. Exactly. You'll see there'll just be a pause, and I'll have this look on my face, and you'll be like, "Yep, I see the joke." You don't even have to say it. All right. Freezing transformation. The first thing we're going to talk about now in terms of speeding up our workflow is hotkeys. Now, it's true, I didn't give you guys too many hotkeys when you first got in this class, and there really is a good reason for that. The reason I did not give you too many hotkeys is because if you sort of study and learn just the hotkeys of an application, you have a very narrow view of what that application can do. It's a lot like, I don't know if you guys have ever been to New York City and you've seen those horse-drawn carts that take people for rides through the park. Have you guys seen those? They're in a lot of scenes. Basically, if there's a movie in New York, that's going to happen because that is pretty cool. Although I got to be honest with you, the ones that are like it's a cart being pulled by a guy on a bike, way more fun. I mean, one's more romantic, but the other, there's like zigzagging in and out of traffic. That's exciting. Anyway, in terms of that horse cart, those horses have blinders on them, right? So that can narrow their field of view because horses get spooked easily and they don't want them, seeing things like, Carnage, King Kong, whatever. So they keep these things on them so they can't see. And using just hotkeys in an application has a tendency to do that. You get like tunnel vision. And I want you to explore. I want you going up into the marking menus and seeing the drop down and going, okay, what's the tool I'm looking for? Okay, ooh, what's that one do? I want you to see those things and look for those things. But that does not mean that hotkeys are not important. They're very important, and they can definitely help speed up your workflow. Now, there are many hotkeys for things, but sometimes there's not a hotkey for what you want to do. And the good news is Maya is infinitely customizable. You can put anything as a hotkey. And they did that on purpose because not everybody's workflow is the same. Not everybody likes and uses the same tools. So what's nice is you can create your own hotkeys for whatever the heck it is you want. And then you've got your own little set of special tools for whenever you're working. And again, you can modify your workflow accordingly. So what we're going to do is if you go to Window, Settings and Preferences, Hotkey Editor, we can actually create our own hotkeys as we need to for whatever it is we like to do that there's not a hotkey for. And we're going to create a hotkey for freezing transformations, and just so that you can see how easy we can set that up. All right, so let's go take a look at hotkey creation. So here we are, Maya. Now, this thing we just did, this freezing transformations, obviously it's a good thing, but if you go to modify freeze transformations, right, there's not a hotkey for it. There's options for it, but not a hotkey setting, okay? Well, if I'm a modeler, that's something I use a lot. That's going to be helpful for me if I have one. So let's make a hotkey for it. So if I go to Window, Settings and Preferences, and I go to my hotkey editor, and this does take a second to launch. There we go. You'll see that there's a bunch of numbers and keys that are sort of a teal colored, and that means they've already got a job. And the gray ones don't have a job. But something you'll notice is if you hold down Shift or Control or Option, you can do 2 button combinations, and there are a lot more buttons available. So panic ye not. But let's say, for example, we want to create a hotkey for that modify freeze transformations, because that's something we do a lot. So the first thing we need to do is come up here and choose a category in the upper left-hand corner. And here I'm going to choose my menu items, because that's where modify is. And if I go under modify, you'll see that's here. And you'll see in there, I've got freeze transformations. And you see that there's no hotkey for it. Okay, well, 8 is not occupied. So I'm going to plug in an 8 there. And then I'm going to hit save. So now that hotkey has been created. So I can take this cube and move it and press 8 on my keyboard. Boom, I just froze transformations. I don't have to go looking for it. It's not a button I've got to go find. It's not a menu item I've got to go hunt down. Just 8, and we're done. Now, if you have a hotkey and you don't want it, also very easily dealt with. You just click that little X. That gets rid of the number there, and then that goes back to available. And then that's no longer a hotkey, because if I move this thing, generate some transformations, and press 8, Maya goes, so what? Make sense? Hell yeah? There we go. So hotkeys are your buddy, and you can make a whole bunch of them for whatever it is you need and whatever it is you do. That can definitely... No, those hotkeys will travel with you and your copy of Maya. It is a part of your preferences. Does that make sense? And literally, if you took your preferences folder and copied it, you could use somebody else's copy of Maya and drop your preferences folder in, and those hotkeys would be there. That's how cool that is. All right. You know, that's an excellent question. I would assume that it does, unless the tool changed somewhat or where it is. That would be my guess. More so if the tool was modified, because periodically they try to make tools better. In some cases they are better, some not. But I would assume as long as that stuff is the same, because newer versions of Maya, the new code is built on top of the old code for the most part, unless it's a brand new thing. Yeah. All right, let's take a look at another thing. You probably noticed this by accident and totally freaked out, the hotbox. The hotbox is all about speeding up your workflow. If you hold down your space bar, you'll notice, boom, your screen is absolutely filled with menu items. And what's cool about them is they're all right here. They're wherever your cursor is. If your cursor is here, they appear here. And you'll notice, okay, I've got all of my modeling stuff up there. You know, I've got my mesh tools, I've got my surfaces. But if you look, you're like, wow, I've got animation stuff in here. I've got some rigging stuff in here. And what this does is it makes it so that you don't have to change your status line setting to get to tools from other disciplines. You can literally just hold down the space bar and everything is right there, whatever you need. So again, that can really speed things up in terms of your workflow, because everything you need is right there at your fingertips. You don't have to go looking for it. So again, hold down that space bar and then you use your mouse or your pen to navigate to the tool or the menu item you need. And again, all of them are right there. So that's a pretty speedy way to work. And again, save you a ton of time. It doesn't seem like much, but anything you do many, many times, if you can cut a little corner off of it, it's pretty good. All right. Marking menus, another amazing way to speed up your workflow. The way the marking menus work, it's kind of like the hotbox, but we're using Command and the right mouse button and Shift and the right mouse button. And what you'll notice is these tools pop up again right where your cursor is, and you know, all stuff that we use all the time. The multi-cut tool, insert edge loop tool, mirroring our polygons, you know, we didn't get into the smoothing yet, but extrude, you know, softening and hardening edges, all that stuff is right there. And again, it's Command and right mouse button and Shift and right mouse button. And you can pop right to those tools. And it gets to the point where you know where they are. You're not even looking. You just, you know, whether you got to go left, right, up, down, to get to these various marking menu items. All right, now, so exciting and so important are all of these time-saving things that we have a reward system in place for anybody who we see using these things. So if Brian and I are walking around and we happen to see somebody using hotkeys, marking menus, the hot box, you are rewarded with really cool stickers. Oh yes, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle stickers too. Yes, not lame, you know, smiley faces. We got Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. Although I am looking out for really cool unicorn ones too. But anyway, what's that? Can I get Disney? I will do that. I will get Disney just for you. But anyway, so if I catch you with doing any of these time-saving things, you get to earn stickers to adorn your laptop with and mock your friends for how many more you have than they do. And you get to pick. It's not my choice. You choose the turtle you wish. I don't have Splinter though. I'm sorry, he's not on there. But I have all the other major artists. And for my digital friends, I will send you a picture of the turtle of your choice, and an awesome picture too, not a lame one. Yeah. Absolutely. Print it out, print it out and put it on your wall. There's always Ninja Turtle stickers available. All right, so let's talk a little bit about image planes. Image planes, as you know, save us a tremendous amount of time when it comes to modeling. They speed up the whole process. They help so much with the accuracy with regard to how we build these things. So, tell me what's basically the good and the bad of image planes in terms of finding a good one, and then how do I get them in there so I can build the stuff that I want to build? That's what we're going to talk about next. And again, image planes allow us to basically trace images with polygons, and that allows us to build. All right. Now, in our world, we take 2D and turn it into 3D all the time. We've been doing it for ages. They're called blueprints. Blueprints are basically a 2D concept of something that will be 3D when we finish building it. Well, what makes a good blueprint is actually what makes a good image plane as well. When you're looking at image planes, what's very handy is if you get good flat side views, good flat front and back views, top views, you know, it depends on the thing you're building, but as many views as you can get. And there are websites such as this one that actually create image planes or something that can be used like an image plane for that very function. Theblueprints.com, I think it's the-blueprint or the_blueprints.com. Have you? They have a ton of like vehicles, you know, trucks, cars, tanks, planes, you name it. So that's a really good one to access. But basically, they're going to give you these image planes that are ideal for modeling purposes. And they're such a help. Now, sometimes you have to use a regular photograph. You know, it might be one that you've taken yourself even. But just so that you know, nice flat side views, nice flat front views, you know, that's the kind of thing that's going to help you out tremendously with modeling whatever it is you're going to model. So be sure to bear this in mind when you're looking for your reference images for whatever it is you're trying to build. Now, let's get into how do we actually do that. Yes, I know you'd be excited. So what we're going to do is I've actually already given you some image planes to work with, and they're already set up for you and ready to go. So all we'll have to do is bring them in. But be aware that when we're trying to create image planes and we want to bring them into Maya so that we can model, we want to take the images we want to use and put them into our source images folder. I know some of you guys have already gone into some of those folders when you're building these things and you're looking over the pictures we've given you. And source images is the default folder where Maya goes to find reference images to bring into Maya. So that's where you want to make sure you put them. So you'll find images on the web or, you know, pictures you've taken, put them in your source images folder, and then you take the following steps in order to bring them into Maya. All right. So of course you want to put it in the folder for the project you're working on and set your project, of course. All right. So let's get into image plane importation and alignment. All right, so the first thing you want to do is set your project. And this is an activity, so I'm going to set my project to my activity file folder. Make sure I got that going. And again, in terms of what we did for you, we have a source images folder, and it's got all the images for the cool stuff that we had you guys build and for your different activities. And you'll notice that there's two images in here called mech front and mech side. And these are the guys we're going to be tapping into. But I just wanted to point out that they are in your source images folder, because that's the folder by default Maya goes to for image planes. So since I've set my project to my activity file folder, now all I have to do is bring those images in. And the process is very simple. You just go to your panel menus up here, and you go to View, Image Plane, Import Image. All right. And what happens is, because I set my project, Maya immediately goes to my source images folder and says, well, which one of these do you want? You select it and you hit open, and it brings the image plane in. Now, in terms of its use, basically what we're doing is we're tracing polygons using a picture, or we're tracing a picture using polygons. And it's critical that we use the correct view. Now, how many of you guys have ever traced anything when you're drawing? Anybody ever trace anything? Come on, admit it. I know you've done it, Brian. Once. They made me do it. All right, now the key to tracing, though, and you and I both know this even though we've never done it, the key to tracing is you've got to tape down the original, because if that shifts while you're tracing, that totally messes everything up, right? So we got to make sure that that thing is ironed to the floor so that we can use it to trace. And if you look at this, you can see there's no way I can model using this as a reference image, because it seems to be moving. And that's because the image, when you bring an image plane into Maya, it literally attaches it to the camera you imported into. So since it's attached to that camera, wherever the camera looks, the picture's going to go. Does that make sense? So you can't bring an image into your perspective camera. And so that's a no-no. But I always show you guys, because there's always somebody who's going, hey, this thing doesn't work. I hate image planes. So the point is, you don't bring it into your perspective view. What you want to do is bring it into one of your orthographic views, because those are the views we modeled from anyway. So in terms of my orthographic views, I'm going to go to my front view camera. So which image of my mech do you think I'm going to bring in there? Front view image, front view camera. So again, the process is View, Image Plane, Import Image. And I'm going to choose my mech front. Oops. There it is. Mech front. Bring it in. All right. Now, in terms of the image plane, once you've got it in there, we have to align it. We can't just leave it wherever it is. This thick black line represents the surface of the world I'm building, this environment, Gesundheit, that I'm creating. And it basically is this grid surface here. Again, it represents sort of the world, the surface of the world. So what I want to do is raise my image up, and I want to build my object so that it's resting right on the ground. See, I'm going to get his little toes right there on the ground, so it looks like he's sort of standing on the surface of the world I'm building. And what's helpful about this is, if I do that with everything I build, when I start importing them into the same scene, they're all on the ground already. I don't have to worry about, is everything lined up just right? I know it's in the right spot, because when I built it, it was in the right spot. Does that make sense? So you don't end up with geometry, impossibly floating ever so slightly above the ground, which gives it the appearance of weightlessness, which totally kills the illusion of whatever environment you're trying to build. So again, one less thing to worry about. Now, the other thing that you want to do is, since we use a lot of tools that utilize symmetry and mirroring and all those fun kind of things, what you want to do is try to look at your object and see if there's some symmetry element to it, And then you want to use this thick black line that goes down the middle of your scene to kind of divide your object in half. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this little circle here in the center of my mech's face and kind of use that as my middle point. All right, I want to make sure I've got about half on each side for my mech. And you can see the image is lined up over here in perspective. So now it's time for me to bring my other image plane in. It's my side view image, so I'm going to bring it into my side view camera. View, image plane, import image. And then I'm going to go to my mech side and bring that in. Now, just like before, I want my mech to have sort of his toes on the ground, so I'm going to lift him up and just rest him toes on the ground there like that. And this particular image, I don't really have there's no real symmetry going on here, but what I'm going to try to do is kind of divide his mass more or less in half down the middle, and just line that image up like that. And here's where it starts getting exciting, because now my images are sort of crisscrossing in the perspective view. And what's of the utmost importance is that things line up in this view, because they really need to be, like if you look out here, here's the surface of my mech, here's the top of its head, as it were, right? Here's the same line in my side view. And you can see they're not lining up. This is not one continuous line. So what I'm going to have to do is make a little bit of an adjustment. Now, do I just need to raise it up a little bit so that those lines meet? Possibly. I might even need to scale the image a little bit. And I'm going to scale from the middle to make them line up. I don't know what it's going to take, but I have to have the design elements of the side view marry up very nicely with the side elements with the front elements, so that they agree in terms of their proportion. Because if these objects or these images are of different proportions, then the problem is my model will not turn out right. I will have a really hard time modeling because the spatial relationships are not agreeing with each other. So I'll be like halfway through my model and this doesn't look right. This isn't fitting together. How the heck does this detail go on here? So it's very important that you figure out what it is you need to do in order to get this stuff to line up. So I'm going to move it up a little bit here. And again, I want to try to make it so that the line here lines up with the line there. And then, of course, I still want to make sure that my toes are on the ground. Looks like I'm hovering ever so slightly above here, but I'm doing the same thing over there. Maybe I'll take them both down just a tiny bit so that they're just touching the ground, just touching the ground. That looks like that's working. And again, I can use some other elements within here. For example, this circle here should match up with this circle element here. So if I back it in like this piece here should match up with that. And then, of course, this diameter here should match up with that there, because that's the same detail. So I can kind of check to see how well things are lining up. All right. So once you get those things looking good, and I know it's tedious, but believe me, it is well worth it to get those image planes lined up properly, because they will save you so much time later on. You don't want to be halfway through your model and realize there's no way you can build it with the way your image planes are set up. So get them lined up like that. Now, once they are lined up and they agree, yeah, go ahead.
Do you have to set your scale, like our production scale,
Oh, that's an excellent question. Yeah. Do you have to set your production scale for your reference images? And the truth of the matter is, no, you don't have to do that right away. You can do that in advance, or you can do that later on. I prefer to do it later on. So we talked about the idea that 1 grid unit is 1 inch. That's the scale for this class, for the project that we're working on, right? Now, in terms of this object, the image planes you use, that doesn't mean that's what size the object is really, because you and I both know I can take a picture of the Empire State Building and put it in my pocket, but I can't put the Empire State Building in my pocket. So just because you've taken a picture of it doesn't mean that's the right size. Does that make sense? So that's why we have scale to figure things out. Now, in terms of the scale for this thing, what I'm going to do is build it as close to the reference as I possibly can. I don't like to use the word perfect, but that's my goal. And once it's all done, then I'm going to take a look at, okay, what's the scale of this thing? How big is it? And then I'm going to make it the right size afterward. Does that make sense? And then after I make it the right size, then I'll freeze transformations because that's its home size. That's what size it should be. Does that make sense? Get a hell yeah? Hell yeah. All right. How about a digital hell yeah? What do you guys got for me? Yeah. There we go. Yeah, I apologize for my potty mouth. Awesome. No, that's a terrific question. When do I make that adjustment for scale? Again, I could adjust my image planes, but it's just easier to do that after, in my opinion. But that's just me. All right. So now it's time to model, and I've got these images in here, and I'm so excited about them. But right now they're kind of in my way, to be honest with you. It's kind of difficult to work like this. So what I like to do is I take my images and then I move them out of the way so that I can model. And I know you're thinking, wait a minute, we just worked really hard to set that up, Steve. I don't want to do that again. Why are you moving stuff around? What's the matter with you? Okay, well, let's take a look. I'm going to grab my front view image here, and I'm going to go to my front view camera so that you can see the images selected here. And I'm going to show you that as I move the image off the grid, is it changing size over here in my front view? No, it's not. Now, the reason that is, it's kind of an optical illusion. This is a perspective view. It has perspective. So as it moves away from me, it gets smaller. That's how perspective works. Orthographic views do not have perspective. That's why everything looks flat. So as a result, this thing could be right next to me or 100 miles away, and it's the same size in this view. So I can move it off this center area so that I can model, and I don't have to worry about it. Now, one thing you do have to be aware of is if I bring the image this way, you will notice I suddenly don't have the grid in front of my image. But if I move it this direction, you see how the grid suddenly appears? So now my grid is visible. I like to have the grid in front of the picture. It helps me kind of line things up. So I will move the image so that it is grid in front, image in the back. So when I grab this one, again, if I go this way, I lose my grid. But if I go this way, I get my grid back. Does that make sense? It just helps with aligning things. Now, truth be told, I really don't even use the image planes in my perspective view. They don't have a good use. I'm really sort of looking here and here when I'm modeling. So this view, really, I just want to look at the object itself and see how it's looking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually hide my image planes by going to Show, and I'm going to uncheck image planes, and that just hides them in this view completely. And of course, they're still visible here because these guys have their own Show menu, which I'm not unchecking the image planes. Now you might say, well, why didn't you just do that? Why bother moving them off the grid and what have you? You could have just turned them off. Well, I'll tell you, there's a funny thing that I've noticed with some copies of Maya. I don't know if it's the current one or not, but every once in a while when I'm modeling, if I have image planes in here but they're not visible, I still can't see the vertices on the other side of the object. It's like it's blocking them. There's a weird thing that it does. So just to avoid that in all situations, I just move them off the center of the grid there and then just hide them. And then they're out of the way and I don't have any weird, why can't I see that? Why can't I select that? That doesn't happen. Does that make sense? Just something I've noticed in the various versions of Maya. So now that I've got this thing lined up, I got my image planes hidden, everything is all set up, now I can model this thing. And anybody who wants to, go ahead and model it and bring it in. I'll show the whole class. Incidentally, in case you were wondering / curious, this mech is actually made of Legos. Yeah, these are all Lego parts. Yeah. I have many Legos now, not just as a kid. We'll go home and have a build off at my house. I have a suit. It's all Legos, and I wear it around my house, and I pretend I've got an exoskeleton. Sometimes I walk like a robot when nobody's watching. All right. So here we go. Build that mech if you want to. Now, I just taught you guys how to bring image planes in and align them so that you can model. Do you think I'm going to ask you to do that? Yes. Yes, you know I am. That's the way I work, right? I'm not that complex. In terms of when you're going to do that, when you guys get to your week, no, is it week 3? I think it's your week 3 turn in. You're going to start building level 3 assets. Well, your level 3 assets, we give you the image. You have to do everything else. So you're going to have to create a project file. You're going to have to take those images, put them into the source images folder. You're going to have to set your project to that folder you just created, like we did on the very first day. And then you're going to have to bring those images in and line them up. You will do that. Does that make sense? And in so doing, learn what it takes to make that happen so you can build anything you want to. Make sense? Yes. Hell yeah? Awesome. Good. All right. Let's go to some more fun stuff. And there was much rejoicing. Let's talk about materials. Yay, something different. I know, it's tough to talk about modeling every day, so I sprinkle in some other fun stuff. So, materials. Materials are basically what everything is made of in Maya. Now, for us, when we think of materials like wood, metal, plastic. Okay, these are the materials things are made of. But when we think of materials, we kind of think of kind of their physical properties. How does wood behave when I try to bend it? How does plastic behave? How does metal? Because we're very physical with our materials because we want to make stuff out of it, right? But in Maya, nothing really has physicality to it unless we apply dynamics or something like that. So what we do when we're talking about materials in Maya is we're talking about how does the surface react to light? Because that's something Maya can do. Maya can generate light. Maya can generate the behavior of light. So therefore, in Maya's opinion, materials mean how does it react to light? So when you're looking at various materials, you can see, some materials have sort of a soft highlight on their surface. It sort of phases out here towards the edges here. It's sort of diffuse highlight, but it is reflective. Other materials, a little bit more diffuse, a little bit less crisp in terms of the highlight, but there's definitely light being reflected back from a light source that's shining on this stuff. In some instances, the light actually penetrates the material to a certain degree. In some instances, the highlight is so crisp that it's basically reflective and you can see yourself in it because the light is bouncing back so cleanly and so pristinely. And again, the behavior of light is something that Maya can figure out with regard to surfaces. Reflections, refractions, the depth at which light penetrates a surface, color information that's carried with it, which is radiosity is the term for that. But all of this stuff has to do with, well, how does light behave when it strikes the surface of whatever the heck this thing is? All right, now, in terms of the materials, all of the materials are housed in a window called the hypershade. And the hypershade, the name kind of gives it away, that's where the shaders are, but that's how does that surface react to light. And there's a lot of different surfaces in there, and they do different things in terms of shiny, less shiny, translucent, transparent. All of those are basically attributes. So when you create a material, here's a material that I've created, plastic, metal, glass, whatever, and it's got attributes to it. And the attributes are things like color or transparency, ambient color, incandescence. These are all things that talk about how does that material react towards light. So we can adjust those things. Attributes are qualities, behaviors. Like you might say somebody's tall, somebody's got blonde hair, somebody's got blue eyes. These are all attributes of a human being. Well, these are materials and they have attributes too that we can adjust. Now, by default, everything we build in Maya is made of Lambert number 1. Lambert number 1 is the default material in Maya. And Lambert number 1 is basically this material here, and you get a little sample there, and that's what you're seeing here, a Lambert material. It's sort of a dry, chalky material. Stuff like the acoustic tile in the ceiling is very Lambert-like in behavior. The sidewalk is very Lambert-like in behavior. Even actually the carpet is very Lambert-like in behavior. Light does strike the surface. It is reflected back towards the eye so that we can register color and shape, but I don't see highlights in the rug at all. Does that make sense? Very Lambert-like in behavior. Now, for this class, we only use Lamberts, and that's you know, bubble wrapping things to keep it nice and safe. So we can play all we want with the Lambert material, but we don't touch any of the other ones because those will actually up our render time and can cause issues in terms of you being able to finish. So as a safety measure, we only use this Lambert material. You can play with the other ones though, but let's take a look at how they all work. All right, let's go to, let me show you a little bit about materials. I'm going to make a new scene. Okay. All right, here we are with materials. And let's say, for example, I'd like to make this cube blue, right? Right now, it's made of the default material in Maya, Lambert number 1. And everything is gray, which is dreary and dull. So let's make some color for it. It makes it a lot more fun. So if you want to go to the Hypershade, it's Window, Rendering Editors, Hypershade. And that opens up the Hypershade. And in terms of the window, there's all kinds of stuff in here. But I want to warn you about, here we go. Thank you, Maya. Maya's going to take a little nap here. It did. And it's honestly, a lot of times it's messing with the Hypershade that causes that to happen. And that's why I was just about to tell you, watch out for the material viewer. Window, Rendering Editors, Hypershade. And what I was going to show you is if you take a look at the material viewer, oh wow, it's like instantly crashing now. Let's do this. I'm going to open it up in another copy of Maya. I do have a copy of 2018, just in case it's raining or something. I need an extra copy of Maya.
So it'd be better to just save before even opening the material editor.
Probably a good idea. And I got to be honest with you though, this is the first time 2017 has systematically crashed the minute I open the Hypershade. So I don't know what's up with that, but you know, I gotta get it done. So you gotta find a way to make it happen. Windows, Rendering Editors, Hypershade. Let's see what it does this time. Yeah, no, it's working with me this time. All right, now in terms of the Hypershade, something that I wanted to point out to you guys, which is definitely one of those things you got to be careful of, is you'll notice that the property editor lists the attributes of a material. And I honestly, I don't think I know a faster way to get Maya to crash than making adjustments to the attributes using the property editor. That seems to be the express train to Maya going night-night. So what I would say is when you create a material in Maya, if you look over here in your main interface, if you look, you'll see that in the attribute editor, I have all the same attributes as I have down here in the property editor. Does that make sense? I use the attribute editor. That does not crash. Does that make sense? So please do that. All right, now, in terms of what's going on in here, you will notice by default, there are 3 materials in here. They are Lambert number 1, the default material in Maya. There's a shader glow shader and a particle shader. And again, these are the default materials in Maya. Please leave those guys alone. No touchy. They don't work and play well with others. So don't go in there and mess with their attributes. Leave those guys alone. The good news is if you want to make materials, you can make as many as you want and you can mess with those till the cows come home. But just leave these guys alone. So what will happen is if you look down here in the create section of the Hypershade, you'll see there's a whole bunch of materials in here, and they do all kinds of really fun stuff. But what we're going to concentrate on is the Lambert material, and you'll see it right here. And if you want to make a Lambert material, all you have to do is click with the left mouse button, and then boom, this new material is created. Now, once it's created, I get the heck out of the Hypershade. So here's my material. All right. Now, the material, always a good idea to name your materials. Kind of like Photoshop, where if you don't name your layers as you go, you end up with 10,000 layers. You don't know what's on what layer, and it becomes a catastrophe. So great idea to name stuff. So I'm going to call this my blue material. All right. So blue material. Now, in terms of this blue material, at the moment, it's not blue. I can see from my sample it's still gray. If I look at the attributes for the material, you see right up here at top, color, the very first thing. Well, this is how I change the color of the material. All I have to do is click on this little field right here, and it opens up the color history. And with the color history open, I can choose colors that I have used in the past if I want to. I can, add some tint to that and what have you. But what's really fun is using these controls down here. I can either adjust using these colors here, or I can adjust over here, and you'll notice it kind of changes the sample. And I can choose, whatever hue I want in terms of the color. I can go into the saturation, which is, is it a very soft color or is it a very vibrant one? So I can kind of slide through there. And then I can add to the value. I can either darken it or lighten it by tinting to get the color I want. And as I said, you can also use this color wheel in here, which is a lot of fun because I can drive around in the outer perimeter to get my hue, and then I can work through here to get my tint and what have you. Now, once I'm happy with the color, this is the color that it is. Now I can apply it to an object. So first I'm going to make an object to apply it to. All right. And let's get that Hypershade open. Window, Rendering Editor's Hypershade. And you'll see, oh yeah, there's my blue material that I made. And to assign the material, there's like a bunch of different ways you can do it, but one of the easiest is if you just hold down your middle mouse button and you get the green plus of power, which you should remember from your hierarchy fun, drag that material over to the object and just let go. Now this object is made of... Oh, for sure. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. So you can add color, and here I'm going to get the attributes up here. And what's cool about this color that I've created is I can make other objects, and I can literally assign the same material to them, and everything I assign that color to will be that color. So I can make as many things made out of that material as I want. Now, something to bear in mind, though, if I change that color to something else, then every object that is made of that same color or that same material, interesting. Yeah, it's not updating. That's all right. Let me stick that on there. Let me make another one. Let's stick that on there. Let me make a modification to my color here. That's interesting. All right, well, you're going to have to take my word for it on this one because typically what happens is when you adjust the color, every object that's made of that color also adjusts. So everything that's made of that green will be that color green. If I switch it to pink, then everything is pink. So something you have to be aware of is if, oh, there we go, now it updated. If you want to make one object pink and one object green, you just have to make another Lambert material. So if I want to make something else, I make another Lambert. I color it and make it pink, and then I assign it. So I can make as many different colors and as many different shades as I want. And incidentally, when it comes to the attributes of a material, you'll notice right down here, transparency. Watch this. Is that how we make windows? For shizzle, right? So you want to make something somewhat transparent or looks like a giant pink jelly cube? That's how you do it. But point being, you can make as many different colors as you want. And in terms of those adjustments, what we're doing here is we're adding color by object. Does that make sense? I'm adding color by object. Now, I'm not limited to just objects. I can also assign color to specific faces. So for example, let's say I wanted this cube to have one side of it that was red. I could make a new material. This is going to be my red material. All right, I'm going to change it to the color red. All right, now I don't want the whole thing to be made of red. I just want one of the faces. So what I can do is go to face mode, select the face that I want to be red, and then I'm going to come over here to the hypershade, hold down my right mouse button, and this menu set pops up, and at the top you'll see assign material to selection. And what it will do is assign the red to just the face that I had selected. So you can assign color specifically by the faces or the shapes of the faces. So for example, if I wanted to have a nice blue cube in the center of this face, I could literally grab this face, do an extrusion, make a smaller face inside of a larger one, and then grab this face and assign the blue material to it. So really the only limitation to the assigning of color that I can do with my geometry is the edge flow of your model. So if you need to, you can use like your multi-cut tool or the insert edge loop tool and cut like the shapes you want and then color those shapes the colors you want to make them. The way I like to think of it is, imagine it's like a stained glass window, right? And your edge looping is sort of the leading in between. Whatever the shapes of the faces are, you can add color to those areas specifically. Now, this is not texturing. I want to make sure you guys understand. I'm not texturing this geometry. I'm just adding color to it. And what's nice about this, what I like is, number one, it's way more interesting to look at. It's a lot more fun when you're looking at something with color rather than everything being gray. But what's really fun is when you're modeling, you can make different parts of the thing that you're building, different colors, different shades, you know, lightness and darkness, and it gives you a better view of what it is you're looking at. Sometimes it's kind of hard when you're modeling to see depth when everything is sort of the same flat gray. Does that make sense? So you can make sort of the base of whatever it is you're making sort of a darker color, and then the pieces as they go outward make them a slightly lighter color, and you can really start to see the depth of what you're building. And it's a little bit easier to see, and again, a lot more fun. Because you can assign materials to make things look, you know, a little bit glassy, a little bit transparent, you know, starting to look more like the thing you're building. And for me, it's more fun than just looking at gray. So again, a good technique for modeling. And like I said, baby steps towards UV mapping and texturing because we're going to be working with materials to do that as well. So does this process make sense in terms of assigning color? How about my digital friends? You guys on board? All good? Awesome. All right. Well, you know, I don't like to leave you hanging by showing you something cool and changing gears. What I like to do is give you a fun little activity. So we're going to do a fun little activity. I want you guys to open up your toolbox exercise. You guys remember this? It was like the very first thing we did, the toolbox activity, moving some shapes around. So what we're going to do is open up your toolbox activity, recreate the shape tower that you see, and now we're going to color the geometry this time. Yeah, that's right, upping the difficulty level. So I'm going to open my scene. I've got to set my project because I'm in a different version of Maya. Set my project to, what do I want? Oh yeah, my activity file folder. And I'm going to open up my toolbox activity. Boop. Toolbox. All right, so here's my toolbox activity. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create my own colors because there's colors in there already. But I'm going to create my own colors. Go to the hypershade. Here's the hypershade. And again, to create a new material, all you have to do is, again, go to Lambert and click on it. It makes a brand new Lambert. I'm going to name it, of course, I'm going to color my material. I'm going to make it a nice vibrant pink color there. And you can assign that material to as many different pieces as you'd like. But I'd like you to, create a couple of different colors and assign them to the various pieces. And then what I'd really love to see is the fact that you can add color to some faces and not others. So do me a favor and make one of your objects have more than one color on it so that I can see that you can assign color by face. And you can do any design you want. Feel free to have fun with this one. And Brian and I will walk around and make sure that you are able to do this. Again, add color by object as well as by face, so we can see different groovy designs. Yes. First color the material, then assign the material to the object. But don't make changes to Lambert number 1. Remember I told you make a new Lambert. Right now you're in Lambert number 1. Yes, the hypershade. Yes. Nope. You go to the Create menu, look for Lambert, and click on it. Then modify its attributes in the attribute editor. So what do you think, guys? This is pretty fun. Not too hard, pretty easy to do, but it makes things a lot more entertaining. Oh, cool. I like your color choices. Yes, that's mine. I built that so you can't touch it. You have to make your own. You have to make your own. Hey, how's it going? What's that?
Felt you behind me.
Oh, yes. Most people can't tell when I'm lurking about. I get that from my grandmother. She was able to walk in and out of her room and you wouldn't even know she was there. I think she was a ninja. Cool. Good. Yes. You just drag with the middle mouse button and drop it on there. Yes, middle mouse. Hold it down and drag it on. It's just like connecting nodes to each other. Same thing. Middle mouse button. Hypershade. Window, rendering editors, Hypershade. That's where we create materials, and we modify the materials, and we assign them to things. Woohoo! Miami Dolphins colors. All right. Seems like you guys are doing okay. You got it worked out? Oh, there's a bunch of different ways. You can drag it with the middle mouse button. You can go into the Hypershade and hold down the right mouse button and assign to selection. You can also hold down your right mouse button over the geometry and assign it that way as well. There's a ton of different ways. Down into the menu set if you hold it down. Right mouse button over the geometry. See, there's, whoops. If you look in through there, there's like assign new material, assign existing material, assign favorite material. There's all kinds of stuff. So if you've created a material and you've named it, you can find it. Yes? Just press 5. There you go. 5 is shaded mode, 4 is wireframe. It is basically just adding colors to things. I think it makes it more interesting to look at. Personally, that's me. All right. Looks like you guys are doing pretty well with this. Again, not an overly complicated process, but once you've done it, it makes a whole lot more sense. Hopefully you guys think that's fun. I like to color up my geometry. All righty. Now, that in mind, let's talk about your skill check for today's lecture. Yay! Your skill check for this lecture is we're going to take our zombie kill bus and we're going to add color to it. Color by face, color by object, and dress it up and make it look super cool and fun. And what's going to be really neat about this particular skill check is I'm going to have you guys do a screen grab of it and post it as one of your discussions so you guys can share with each other how your zombie kill bus turned out. Now, in terms of the zombie kill buses, we've gotten all kinds of fun stuff in the past. Let me show you a couple of examples of some nice ones that we've gotten. Let me see. I think I've got one posted on FSO. Week 2. There we go. You see up there's a really fun version that somebody did. It's definitely got some Mario influences there. It's pretty cool. I think I got a couple other ones. Is this one? No, that was a lightsaber. Yeah, somebody did a lightsaber for me there. Here one. Here we go. This is a really cool one I got. Dun, dun, dun. I don't know what this is up on top. It looks like you get satellite TV or something. But we got the little rear blades too there. It's pretty nice. And you know, heaven help you if you sit on this thing. Yeah, you're not going under any bridges in that thing, or parking garages are a definite no. But in terms of keep the zombies away, that's going to do it. I don't know, kind of Deadpool-esque in its appearance. But anyway, feel free to color up that bus any way you want. And as you can see, you know, you can do a little bit of light modeling to it. I don't want you to rebuild it entirely. But if you want to do a little bit of modeling to it, just so you can change it up some, add some more fun little details, feel free to do so. and create something interesting. I encourage you to have fun always. This is another pretty good one here. Yep, it's the mystery machine. I love the hubcaps on this one. Yeah.
That gives me an idea. We can decorate our bus any way we want.
Any way you want. It's entirely up to you. So feel free to have fun with this one. It's a pretty good project. It doesn't take too much time, but it's pretty interesting, and you learn a lot about assigning colors and to faces and objects in order to do that. All right, so have fun with that. That should be a good time. All right. Now, one thing I definitely wanted to talk to you guys about in terms of your turn-ins. I think you guys did terrific. I don't know if you had a chance to take a look at your week 1 turn-in grades. Overall, you guys did really well, both locally and digitally. You guys did terrific. But I would say probably the 2 things that most people didn't quite get when I looked at everybody was building it in the correct number of parts, and I had people missing out on form points. Those are the 2 things that I saw the most of. Now, in terms of form points, what we're talking about there is detail, 3D detail, details with depth. So if you lost some points on form, then that means some of the details that you put into your model didn't look close enough to the actual details on the surface of the object you were building, or you didn't have enough of them. You just were like, oh, that's close enough. I'm done. So make sure you build those details in there. I want to see you try them. Try to build that stuff in there. And again, we're going for accuracy, so make sure you get those form details. That does make a big difference in terms of, does it look right? So make sure you're getting those form details. Now, the other thing, building it in the correct number of parts. Well, this is something we can talk about in class. I gave you 3 different things to guide you to figure out how many different parts to make things of. Who can give me one of those? What's one of the things I said? What's that? Different materials, absolutely. If you see a different material, that should be a different part. So if you built the sake bottle, you've got a glass bottle and it's got that lightweight aluminum top, right? That's 2 different materials. That needs to be 2 parts. Does that make sense? Gotta be. So, and I'm just throwing the sake bottle out there because quite a few people built the sake bottle, but they built that as 1 piece. That is not 1 piece, that is 2 pieces. The cap comes off. Does that make sense? Okay, so make sure you're getting those materials as a guide. What's another one? There's 3. You don't necessarily have to build the inside of an object, and that's a great question, but I do want you to build the illusion of, or the suggestion that there is an inside. So if you built the sake bottle, yeah, there's a cap on there, but there's an interior to that. I want to see the interior. Just take an extrusion down a little bit inside that makes it look like, oh yeah, this thing has a lip on it and it goes in. I don't want you to model the entire interior. That's a big waste of time and space, unless you need it to do liquids. Like for example, if I was going to actually make it look like there was actually sake in there and I was going to use dynamics and collision elements to make liquid slosh around inside that bottle, then I would have to build the interior. Otherwise, it wouldn't react properly. Does that make sense? But in this instance, I don't need that to happen. Therefore, I'm not going to waste my time with additional polygons and details for something I don't need it to do. Does that make sense? Yeah. Okay. So point being, I just want a suggestion of an interior. You don't have to build the whole interior. But what's another thing? Because there's 2 more things. What's another thing? If it can move or be animated, you know, you got to think about, does it come apart? Does it move? Can it be animated? That's another great way to determine, oh, that needs to be a separate piece because I need that thing to move. And if it's not a separate piece, Gesundheit, it's not going to move. Gesundheit. Gesundheit. I knew there was going to be a third one. People sneeze in 3s and 5s, I've noticed. If you're going to do more than 1. It's a 3 or a 5, and I don't know why that is. Mystery of the universe. It's right up there with why is there always a sock in the dryer missing. You put them all in there. How could there be fewer? All right, now, who can tell me what the third way to determine how many pieces something should be made of? How about my digital friends? You guys know? What's the third way? We talked about materials. Different materials mean different parts. We talked about moving parts being another way to determine. What can you tell me? What's the third one? How can I figure out how many different pieces something needs to be made from?
Scale.
The scale? Not necessarily the scale, because I could build, you know, a 50-foot donut, but that's still going to be made of one material, unless it's glazed. You know, if it's got chocolate frosting on it, that's going to be different. Sprinkles is another material, so that would happen. So not necessarily the scale of the object, but I'm glad you're trying. Anything else? Build it like it's built. Always build it like it's built. So if the actual object is made of 3 pieces, then you have to make the 3D model of it out of 3 pieces. So let that be your guide. Build it like it's built. So again, you got to look at these objects and study them and figure out how they were actually assembled. And that will give you a great heads up as to how many pieces something should be made of. And it's not like, you know, this object is made of 3 pieces and only 3 pieces. And if you chose 4 or 2, you're out. You know, I just want to see you close. So let's get in there and make sure we're making a good job and just hitting the obvious stuff. You know, I'm not asking for perfection by any stretch of the imagination. That was week 1. Week 3, perfection. But at this stage, we're all learning and we're growing. And I'm trying to push you into doing your best and wanting more. So that's what we're always going for. Quality and improvement. And I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with how these classes are structured, but what happens is when you guys move from 3DF to model creation, which is the class that typically follows this one, that's more modeling, more detail, like crazy detail. And we'll talk a little bit about that on the last day of class, but they're going to expect some intense modeling, and the quality level is going to be through the roof in terms of what they're looking for. And then immediately following that, you guys move into a portfolio class. And portfolio classes are not classes where they're teaching you anything, really. They'll teach you a little bit here or there, but it's not structured like lecture lab, and you work. You literally, you got to build stuff. You have to build, and they're just going to give you critiques and feedback on it. So it's like, well, what do you know how to do? Impress me. Build something. And they want you to build the kind of work that you would be able to earn freelance work from. All right? That's a very ambitious goal. But what that means is you need 3DF and model creation to give yourself, Gesundheit, the tools and the skills to be able to be successful in the portfolio class. Does that make sense? So make sure you're paying very close attention and taking notes, because this is not something you can just forget when you walk out of class, like many classes are. And I'm talking anywhere on the face of the earth. There are quite a few classes that you take that you kind of, you know, glean the important stuff. Most of it you just lose. You need this. You know, every class you take here is a step on a ladder. And like Brian and I have said, if you're missing a rung, you're going to fall. So make sure you've got these skills and tools, because they all build on each other. Does that make sense? Okay. So again, make sure you're paying attention to these lessons. If you don't understand, ask questions. Come to the Google Hangout. If you prefer a digital environment, come to the labs, obviously, with your questions and your files. Again, if I could make you guys work together in teams outside of class, I would, because it's great to work as a team, because as long as one person remembers one thing, you know, everybody remembers something, you guys can all work together and help each other. And to be honest, if you have to teach someone else how to do something, you really understand it, because you have to explain it well. So point being, helping someone else is actually, not only does it make you feel all fuzzy inside, but it actually helps you too, because you're going to understand the material better. So there's a tremendous advantage in helping other people. So go to those Hangouts, you know, day or night, 24/7, that thing is open. Make sure you've got Google Chrome downloaded and installed as your browser, because that's what you need to get in the Google Hangout. Firefox or, you know, Safari, those don't work in there. Got to be Google Chrome. And again, all that information is on FSO, so make sure you look it over and set that up properly, and you can come in and see us. I know Marcus and Sarah are in there. I think Sarah's in there on Wednesdays pretty much all day long, and I think Marcus is in there on Fridays all day long. So go see them. There's always somebody in there, just a question of who and when. But take advantage of all that help. Get the help you need, because it's out there. All righty. Any questions about the skill check, the zombie kill bus, and what we're doing? Yeah. Oh, because I disabled it so I could show it to you. Yeah, I'm going to enable it right after this. So yeah, I'm sorry. That might freak you out. Because yeah. No, it's all good. I'm going to switch it back on. Watch. I'll switch it back on right now. And you'll see. Because I disabled it so I could show it to you. I'm going to exit. And then I'm going to enable it. Make sense? It's like magic. All right. So again, make sure you're getting that stuff done. Start working on your week 2 turn in. Don't wait until you turn in your skill checks and then start working on it. Start working now. You have a lot to do, more than you think. And we're building some level 2 models this week, which means they're going to be harder. There's more stuff for you to build, and it's a little bit more complicated. So twofold, there's more to do. All right.
2 models from level 1 and 3 from level 2.
It's rough, so make sure you're giving yourself time. I have a conservative multiplier that I use, times 6. So if I think things are going to take an hour, I assume it's going to take 6 hours, because things always take longer than you think. So block out some serious time. Make a date with Maya and keep it. Yes? Okay, well then wait 1 second. Yes? It's a lecture 6 skill check. It should be on FSO if you look in your week 2 materials. Yep, everything is in there. You just got to find it. It is all listed for sure. Anything else? Are you sure? All right, lecture 6 going once. Oh, there we go. Go ahead. Yeah, what's your question? Yeah, it should be back on now. I disabled it so that I could show you the activity. Now I re-enabled it. So refresh your browser and it should be available.
Wait, so is the bus thing on a separate file again too?
No, you just take the zombie kill bus that you created a hierarchy for, and now we're going to color it. Yep. Yeah, no worries. That's what happens. You start getting really tired. It gets late in the month, and this is what it's going to be like every class after this. This is the way it's going to be. You have a lot to do and not much time to do it. You're going to be tired, but that's why you have to read stuff. Because if you're going by just your memory, you're noticing that as you get more tired, the memory doesn't work as well. Does that make sense? Write stuff down. You can't forget it if you write it down. It's there. That's why I recommend it very highly. Your brain, given enough bad food and not enough sleep, will not work as well as it typically does. So don't trust it. Jot that stuff down. All right. Anything else? Lecture 6 going once. Lecture 6 going twice. Sold. Lecture 6, 1801. All righty, guys. Good luck with your assignments. Let's get that stuff done. And like I said, start working on your week 2 assignment. Don't wait until the weekend to start trying to bang that thing out. There's a lot to do, so get at it. Yeah, no worries. Anytime. It's all about you being successful. I want you guys